Welcome back to the show. For the last segment, I mentioned talking about Roger Goodell and potentially changing the schedule of the NFL from 17 games to 18 games. So before I get into all the details, I want to remind you guys for one last time on this show, if you have any questions or comments you want to make on any of the topics discussed on today's episode, to use the tip and donations link you see on your screen, GSMCPodcast.net. Using that link, I'm able to see your questions, I can read them on air, and carry on the conversation that way, get a different perspective, and just get a feel of what you guys think or want to know more about on the segment topics. It's more interactive, and I think it is a massive help for this show, as well as all the other shows across the network as well. So if you guys are able to use that link with any questions, it would be greatly appreciated. Once again, the tip and donations link is GSMCPodcast.net. And with that, I can talk about Roger Goodell. He was on the Pat McAfee show last Friday, during technically the day of the start of the second round of the NFL draft. And he talked about this topic around having an 18-game NFL season. That's one thing they talked about while having Roger Goodell on the Pat McAfee show. They brought it up. Most recently, they already changed from a 16-game regular season to a 17-game regular season in 2021, and they actually took away a preseason game from 4 preseason games to now 3 preseason games. We've had that for a few years, and it seems fine. To find a reason why they feel like they have to change it, I didn't really know what the main reason would be, but the idea would really be from Roger Goodell, and he seemed pretty adamant about it, is that it would take away 1 preseason game more, and you'd have 2 preseason games instead of 3, and just add another official regular season game to the schedule. And it all seems great. One of the biggest things that I thought was really cool about this was that it would also make the Super Bowl week move back from the first week of February to the second week, and sort of line up in that President's Day weekend range, the way it's set up now. And it would be cool, just because I'm sure I'm not the only one. I can't be the only one thinking that it's Super Bowl week, you're anticipating the game, you want to watch it. It usually stays up a while if you watch the whole thing through the celebrations, the interviews, and everything. And then you come to the realization, like you have to work the next day, you have school the next day. And it doesn't ruin everything, but, it is just like we have to go do what we have to do and move on with our lives so quick like that. I'm sure a lot of people would want to, have that extra day to go back, react to the Super Bowl more, and just live through it an extra day. I think would be great. But Roger Goodell said on the idea of adding another regular season game, he said, "I think we're good at 17 now, but listen, we're looking at how we continue. I'm not a fan of the preseason. The reality is I'd rather replace a preseason game with a regular season game any day. That's just picking quality. If we get to 18-2, that's not an unreasonable thing." And I don't think it's unreasonable at all as well. With this, the preseason, when it was 4 games, it definitely felt like a drag. It felt like an eternity. Plus, you had the Hall of Fame game as well, so it sort of added like another week. It felt like with the preseason, taking away a preseason game and doing that stuff like that, I'm sure more fans would be inclined to favor that situation. Joe Burrow actually responded to it on X, and he suggested that he would be open to the idea of 18 games, but he threw out the idea of 2 bye weeks in there as well instead of just 1. Roger Goodell reacted to that. He said he would welcome that idea, that it seemed like there was no problem with adding 2 bye weeks to that. So that would mean including the bye week in there and including another week to the regular season and making it 18 games. That would mean that the whole season would be pushed back to the President's Day weekend, like I mentioned, usually on the 3rd Monday of February. And it would be almost like a national holiday if you think about it. no work the next day, that weekend, President's Day weekend. You have the Super Bowl. I'm sure it'll be more notably known as really like I said, a national holiday, having the Super Bowl there, a whole week leading up to it with Media Week and the Pro Bowl and stuff like that, the NFL honors. It'll feel really like an extended holiday for that period of days leading up to the big game. And then on top of that, you have a whole other day to be off of work or off of school. I think from that standpoint, it is great. I'm sure a lot of people would want to have that this season right away with how positive that all sounds. There's definitely no issue with the fans, but it would definitely take some time. Roger Goodell didn't mention any time period before. It is 18 games. He just said he would be open to it. He would always like to take away a preseason game for a regular season game, like he said, but it would definitely take some time, I believe, with the NFLPA and the collective bargaining, as well as the TV rights deals and all those sort of stuff, ironing all those not problems, but just hurdles you have to go over. It would take some time, as it usually does when you're talking about the business side of things. That would take some more time, but it would be, I think, a positive thing. I think the way it's trending now, you have more games on holidays, really trying to bring more national attention to this entire NFL. The NFL under Roger Goodell has really been trending in this way of finding ways, any different sort of ways to gain more eyeballs and watching these games. Now you have games on Christmas, you have games in Brazil, you're extending your international presence to different countries. You're playing a game on Friday now. This week, like I mentioned, or this year, Christmas is on a Wednesday. You have the Monday games. You have games on Amazon Prime, on Peacock. It seems like they're reaching all these different sort of avenues with Roger Goodell, and over the recent years that this just doesn't seem too far out of the realm of possibility. I would certainly be a fan of it, but there are some questions you have to bring up. You know, how would it affect the trade deadline? They just recently pushed it back 1 week, and how will that change? Are they going to have to revisit that if they make it another week onto the regular season? I'd like it so there would be an opportunity to have the same amount of home and away games. You know, so far with 17 games, you have to, you know, it is an imbalance between home games and away games. So if you add another week, maybe another bye week, it could become an even number of home games and away games. I'm sure depending on who has the international games and stuff like that, you can't get those back. But if you don't have an international game, if you add another week, it sort of balances out having the same number of home games and away games, which is a massive thing that not a lot of people think about. And figuring out that second bye week would be a headache, I'm sure, for anybody to try and figure out, but it's certainly not impossible. Deciding on the timing of each one will be important. You know, some teams have early bye weeks, and if you have an early bye week, when are you scheduled to have the other one? If you have one really early, is the other one really late in the season? Are they really close in the middle of the season? You know, all those ifs, buts, and what ifs are really the major problems in figuring all of this out. But if you just think back a few years ago, I don't think anybody would have imagined this, getting to this point, playing games in Brazil, extending this to 17 games, and now talking about extending it to 18 games and streaming only games where you have to be subscribed to one of these streaming networks, and having the NFL expand itself more and more each year. It's something during that interview that Roger Goodell made sure to emphasize, you know, extending out, making this a national, a global sort of presence, growing it in other places, making it more well-known, and just growing their game overall. I think it's something the NFL can get behind. And doing so like this, of course, you have to watch out for the players and how it affects them on their bodies, adding another week. Second bye week could certainly help that, but it all depends on how you schedule everything, and that's certainly going to take some time, and how other things can change up until that point when you decide that. That all affects all these big decisions when you're talking about changing the layout of a regular season, adding more games, how it affects maybe playoffs and stuff like that. It all there's a lot of variables around this, but in just simplest terms, the idea of yes, I'm for it, no, I'm against it. I'm certainly for it. I think it would be great, mainly because of that President's Day weekend thing. I think that's just great. I've always wanted to have the next day be off or just not have to work or do school. I guess it is a good thing I'm graduating from school, but regardless, I think it would be a great thing for the NFL to just keep growing their game. And the way it's going, I wouldn't be surprised if this happened. If I were to give a prediction, maybe 2-3 years down the line, not this year, maybe not the next year, but after that, I'm sure it'll become more and more serious for the NFL to consider this a real possibility. That's how I feel about it. I want to know what you guys think. Leave it down in the comments if you're for or against adding another week to the regular season and having it fall on President's Weekend. What are problems you see with it? What are other benefits that I didn't mention? Leave it all in the comments below. I always love hearing what you guys think about this situation and where you guys just stand on it overall. But with that being said, that is all the time I have on today's episode. As always, I want to thank you guys for tuning in to today's show of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show, as well as following the network on Facebook, Instagram, X, and TikTok for more of the network's content outside of sports as well. If you do want to see more of me and this show, check out the GSMC Sports Network channel and the podcast network on YouTube for all the live shows that are on there, fully recorded for you to go back and check out. YouTube Shorts are posted every weekday on both channels, as well as individual segment videos. If you missed a certain segment or just want to rewatch one part of a live show, all of that is on both channels for you guys to go and check out. As a reminder, tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more NFL discussions and just conversations around football in general with me, Manny Maradiaga, as your host. Thanking you guys for joining me on today's episode, and I hope to see you guys all back here again, same time tomorrow.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet. Damn, ain't that great. I don't wanna go to